Hi folks, welcome back to Hopes to Families Ministries. This week I'm up in a lodge at the bottom of Mourne Mountains near Newcastle, staying for a couple of days. So anybody that has been up here will know what it's like when you're driving in the scenic route, the mountains, the sea, the scenery, it's just fabulous. But to us, these mountains, as we were driving in, looked massive. I said to my boys, look at the size of those mountains. And for anybody that's mountain climbing and likes hiking, these mountains mightn't look big to you, but they do to us because we have never climbed a mountain in our life. And I don't think we probably ever will. We are too fond of our food. Exercise doesn't excite us at all. So, but we were looking at these mountains, and I thought, for a joke, I'm going to say to the boys, I said, boys, I have booked us in tomorrow to go mountain climbing. We're going to climb that mountain tomorrow. Well, they were having none of it. They nearly caused the biggest scene in the car. They were like, we are not mountain climbing. We're here in holidays. We are not mountain climbing. Look at the size of that. But I could understand how they were feeling because there's no way I would climb it neither. But as we were driving on, then all I could see was these sheep over the mountain. I was like, boys, who on earth would put sheep all over these mountains? How would they ever find them? And I'm going to see, I tried to stop, and I thought I better not stop here now and make a video. I'll end up causing a car accident or something. So I got a few photos. I'll try and add it into them. But the sheep were everywhere. They either had this red mark on them or a blue mark. So we were driving on, and this really fascinated me. I was like, what farmer, like if one of them sheep goes missing, where would you even start looking for it? The size of this place. But anyway, as we went on, that day, it kept coming back to me, the parable in Luke 15. So I went back that night and I read over it again. But this time, God had spoke to me in a whole different way about this parable. Because I used to always look at it, the wee sheep had went missing, and God goes and rescues it and brings it back. The shepherd brings it back, and that's just such a lovely story that God will rescue us. But this time, God was really challenging me. He was saying, Fiona, you say you're a Christian, you're like Christ, but are you really? I'm going to read this parable out quickly to us. It's in Luke 15. It says, by this time, a lot of men and women with questionable reputations were hanging around with Jesus. So these people in the town might not have had the best of reputation. The people would have looked down upon them. And it says they were hanging around with Jesus, listening intently. They loved listening to what he had to say. The Pharisees and religious teachers, the scholars of those days, they were not pleased. These religious people, these really well-educated scholars in the laws and the books of the Bible, the 5 books of the Bible, they were not happy. They were having none of it. So it says they were not a bit pleased. They growled. They were saying to each other, he takes in sinners and he eats meals with them. He's treating these people like old friends. He's treating these people like he loves them, but he actually likes hanging around with them. Their grumbling triggered this story. So Jesus looked at them and he said this to them. Now, this is what Jesus was saying to the religious people, not to the sinners. This is what he says to the religious ones. Suppose one of you had 100 sheep and lost one. Wouldn't you leave the 99 in the wilderness and the mountains and go after the lost one until you've found it? And when you've found it, he says, wouldn't you put it over your shoulders and carry it home rejoicing? And then you'd call your neighbours and your families and you'd say, come on, let's celebrate. I have found my lost sheep. And Jesus says to them, count on it. There is more joy in heaven over one sinner who is rescued, who returns back to God, than there is over 99 good people in no need of being rescued. And when I was reading this, God had really spoke to me that we're living in a world right now. There's so many, even in social media lately, I've heard so many people, oh, these Christians, oh, they're standing on the street, they're preaching hate, they're just so condemning. Folks, there's a really big difference between religious people and Jesus. Don't ever look at us and think that's what Jesus is, because we have let Jesus down so many times. Here Jesus is speaking to religious people who didn't want to associate with sinners, who didn't want to associate with people who they thought had a bad reputation. You see, Jesus, when I was reading this, God was like, Fiona, would you get up and leave the crowd? Would you get up and leave the 99 good people? You know, that you sitting really comfortable in your church and your wee meetings and all your Christian friends, and life's lovely, and these people don't need rescued. They're not suffering. You're all supporting one another. Do you really act like Christ? Do you get up and leave your comfort zones and go looking? Because these mountains was massive. When he'd went searching, I'm sure it just wasn't for days. I know he'd searched for me for years. I knew about God growing up. I used to always say I believe in God, but I had no relationship with him. And he went searching for me, and he found me years later. When I was speaking to one of the farmers, I says to them, why do you have red and blue marks on your sheep? And he says, so we can identify them. because there's some can be the neighbours, and this area is so big that we have to mark our sheep. And then we were sitting talking, and I was getting fascinated about these sheep. And he was saying that you have to always keep an eye out, because if one of the sheep fall over, he says if it gets cast, where it lies on its back and its legs is all up in the air, he says it is impossible for a sheep to be able to turn itself over again unless the farmer or the shepherd comes and turns it back round. If it doesn't get turned over, it will die. It can never lift itself up. God was saying there's so many people today, and they're like that lamb, they're like that sheep, they're cast. Their life seems like it's impossible. They need help. They can't get up themselves. And he's like, where are you? Because I went searching for my sheep until I found it and carried it home. He was like, Christians, you need to start acting like Christ and not just talking the scriptures. The Pharisees could talk the scriptures. They knew the Bible, but they weren't willing to get up and go out into mountains, go out into areas of difficulty, into wildernesses, into places that's not comfortable. I'm sure that shepherd didn't want to leave his comforts that night to go out into those mountains in the dark and the cold, searching, and he didn't come back. Jesus did not come back until he was rejoicing. You might think you're too far gone. You might think, I can't turn back to God now. I was a Christian years ago. I cannot turn back. God, your shepherd's looking for you, and it's not a coincidence you're watching this today. He is saying, will you let me carry you home? This shepherd carried it back. He knew that wee sheep, that person was too tired. It's too weak. I don't even want you, God said, I don't even want you to walk with me. Let me carry you back. I know how you're feeling. Maybe you're cast right now, that you can't move on. It's impossible for you to move on. And God said, it's going to be impossible unless you let your shepherd turn you around to Christ, turn you around and decide to follow God. Is the only way you're going to get out of that position. Your life's not going to change. You're cast, you're lying there. You need help by your shepherd today to lift you up. And he wants to joyfully carry you home. So when I was reading this, God was like, are you like the Pharisees, Fiona? Are you Christians? Are you like the Pharisees, where you are looking down at people and you think that their reputation, I wouldn't even associate with those people? Today, Jesus is invisible to the world around us. And if Jesus was here in human body again, I think there'd be a lot of people shocked at who he'd be hanging around with, who he'd be eating with. Because it tells us here he was eating with the people that didn't have a good reputation. No, we don't need to stand condemning people. We need to stand loving people. We need to do what Jesus commanded us to do, is love. So folks, I am so sorry if you have ever been turned off God or having a relationship with God because you've looked at us Christians and you've thought, look at them. They're judgmental, they're condemning, they're critical. Your shepherd would walk right now into the darkest places, go searching for you by himself, will leave everybody just to go and to get you. See, Jesus wasn't worried about the Pharisees here, about them frowning at him or them being disgusted who he was hanging around with. It shows us Jesus wasn't pleasing them. He wasn't a people pleaser. He was more concerned about a lost soul than he was about what these religious people thought about him. We need to get like that. We need to get so concerned that there's people around us hurting. There's people broken. There's people lying cast right now in their back and they can't see any hope. They can't see a way out. And we're here to represent Christ. Christ would be away searching for them and he would be carrying them home, rejoicing and celebrating. How many people has got close to God or has told us we're changed and we celebrate about it, or do we talk about it? God is saying, go out, go searching. It's not about sitting in your church buildings. It's not about sitting in your wee groups with all your comfortable friends that don't need rescued. He's saying, if you are really like me, if you are really, really like Christ, you will get out into the world, because there's enough people hurting. We'll not have to look too far till someone's suffering with depression, till someone's suffering with anxiety, fear, rejection, addictions, no hope in life. And Jesus, those is the people Jesus would have been going out looking for and carrying back home, the weak and the tired. So folks, have a blessed day, and let's start doing what Christ does, not just what the Word of God, reading it. Let's be doers of the Word, not just hearers. And also, let Christ carry you today. See, when he is the blue mark and the red mark on the sheep, when we get saved, God puts a stamp on us. In the last days, it says God is going to divide the sheep and the goats. Folks, there is a heaven and there is a hell, and it's very real. And just like that shepherd had stamped his sheep with the red that he knew who his were, God's going to do the same with us. When we give our life over to God, when we say today, Lord, will you be my shepherd, forgive me, he puts your name in the Lamb's book of life. There's a stamp put on you. And then Psalms tells us he is the good shepherd. My sheep will not want. We don't have to worry then, because our shepherd will never leave us, nor forsake us. There's a stamp on you today if you're a Christian, and your shepherd will never let you out of his sight. And if you don't have a stamp, God wants to put that stamp on you today. Call out to him and say, God, I want to hand everything over to you. I don't want to do this anymore. Let him put your name in the Lamb's book of life, so that when the end days comes, when he's separating the sheep between the goat, that he will be saying, my stamp is on you. That eternity, forever, you will spend with the Father. Because folks, it's so real. Heaven is real and so is hell. And not everyone's getting into heaven. Only the ones that have the stamp of the shepherd and their name in the Lamb's book of life will see heaven. So folks, God bless.